Imagine that your agency had a dedicated sales department, a dedicated finance department, a dedicated client relations department, and all of those would be represented by solely AI agents. And this is something that you can do within n8n actually. And the way we're going to do this is to have dedicated workflows which only consist of a specific agent which is an expert in his according field. So we will have an orchestrating agent at the very top, if you will, and this could be, like your personal assistant, or this could be like a head of department, if you will, and this will be connected via a specific node with subsequent agents, which are those specific actors or those specific experts in their according field. And I'm going to show you how to do this. So let's take the following use case as an example. So we have an orchestrating agent which will receive the incoming query or the incoming inquiry from a client, for instance, via email. And this will basically be the trigger for the whole infrastructure that we have right here. And then the orchestrating agent will decide which agent to call for this specific purpose. So it will decide on its own which expert, which specific AI agent, and which flow needs to be called to take care of that specific matter. And we're going to take a look into the specific prompt which controls this agent in a second. And this agent will have access to a pre-sales agent on the one hand, and then also to a client relations agent on the other hand. And we are going to take a look into their character profile, if you will, also in a second. And this is how it will work. So depending on what the matter is, it will delegate a specific task to the according agent and to the according flow. All right, so let's start building this. I have prepared an empty canvas, as you can see, so this will be our orchestrator agent. So the very first thing that I want to do is to add a trigger node, and I'm going to look for Gmail right here. And the trigger I'm going to use is on message received, which obviously is the only one available. And we are going to pull in every email that comes in, so that we will not use any kinds of filters yet, because this will be handled by the orchestrating agent itself. So there won't be any specific settings. This is connected to my Gmail account. The poll times can, be set to every minute. And then we have the event of message received. So every time we receive an email to that specific account, this specific flow will be triggered. The only thing that I am going to do is to disable the simplify button, because this will give us access to the full text, to the full body content of the email we will receive. All right, so I'm going to close this again. And the next thing will already be to set up our AI agent. So I'm going to click on the plus right here. I'm going to jump into the AI section, and then we have our AI agent right here. And what I'm going to do is, first of all, let's take a quick look at this. So we have our AI agent right here. I'm going to click on the spacebar to rename it, and this will be our orchestrating agent or orchestrator, whatever. And then I need to equip it with a chat model, obviously. And I'm not going to now explain this too much. I'm looking for Open Router, which is an interface which allows me to have access to almost any kind of LLM that is out there just by connecting it once with the Open Router API. And I have dedicated tutorials about this. Feel free to take a look at this. And the one that I'm going to use will be just GPT-5.mini. For this case, this is totally fine. And obviously you can choose the one that you personally prefer. I'm going to rename this subnode as well, call it GPT-5 mini, and that's already it. I'm going to close this, and now I already have a working agent. It's that fast and easy. Now, jumping back into the agent settings right here, I'm going to click on this. First of all, I need to define the source for the prompt. So where should the prompt, how the agent is going to behave, actually be coming from? And I'm not going to take the default setting, which is the connected chat trigger node, which is like the default setting and a dedicated node. What I'm going to do is to define it below, and then I have access to this input field, which defines the prompt defined by the user message itself. And this is what I'm going to do. Before I do this, I also am going to choose an additional option, which you can find in this drop down right here, and I'm going to click on system message, and this basically gives me access to another input field where I can define the system prompt. And I have prepared a special system prompt for this use case. And I'm just going to delete this, and I'm going to paste it right here. And let's take a look at this. So I'm going to click on this tiny icon so that it gets a little bigger, and then we can take a quick look at this. And this is its main task. So you are an assistant for processing customer emails. Your tasks include classifying, routing, and also responding to incoming emails. And then we have the classification. What does that mean? Classify emails according to the following categories: inquiry, complaint, or other. And then, a classification determines which follow-up agents the email is routed to. And this is exactly what we already talked about, right? So it is basically using our working as a router, so which dedicated agent is supposed to be responsible for the subsequent process. And then we have the routing. You have access to the following agents, which is the pre-sales agent. Then we have a client relations agent, which is responsible specifically for complaints. The pre-sales agent is responsible for any kind of inquiries. And then we have a general agent. We are not going to take care of this one today. 2 agents are enough, because I just want you to explain the concept itself, and then you can basically just repeat this for your specific use case. All right, then important: if any mail falls into multiple categories, split the concerns, and route only the relevant part to the respectively responsible agent. Then I give a couple of examples, then how it's supposed to respond, and then the output. And by the way, I'm happy to share this prompt in my community. If you'll take in my free community, please take a look at this, and this is where I'm sharing all my assets. All right, so that's enough for this. I'm going to close this again, and now I'm going to take care of the user message. And the user message will be quite simple as well. I'm going to paste this in this field, and this is just saying, this is the text message, and then I'm basically wrapping the email text that we will receive from the previous Gmail node into these email tags, and then I'm just going to use the variable called text, and we're going to take a look at this, what it looks like in a second, and that's already it. So these are the features I am going to equip my orchestrating agent with, and especially the system prompt is going to become quite handy afterwards. All right, now let me close this again, and let's actually get some data, some email that we can work with. So I'm going to cut the connection between both of these nodes right here, and I'm going to execute the flow or execute the step just to get the email from the Gmail trigger. So let's click on this play icon right here, and then we are going to wait. And now it's done, and I received already that data. I'm going to jump into the Gmail node. I already pinned this, so what I just received, and I'm going to toggle this right here, and here you can see that this is the message that I basically prepared from a test account that we have just received. So it just says, "Hi there, I came across your portfolio online and really liked what I saw. Your work on brand identity and digital product caught our attention. We are a mid-sized lifestyle brand currently looking to revamp our online presence. Specifically, we're interested in a full website redesign, and so on and so forth." So yeah, as you can see, this would be obviously a prospect, somebody who might be interested in our agency's service, right? And obviously I am now taking in the role of a marketing agency, for instance, or something comparable. And obviously this depends on your specific use case. All right, so this is some data we can work with. I'm going to reconnect it to the orchestrating agent now, and then I'm going to click in the agent, and now you can actually see that the variable has become green, right? Because now it is actually referring to the specific variable, which is coming from the text variable right here from the previous Gmail trigger, right? So I am just going to drag and drop this into the according field, and this is exactly what I already did. And if I want to take a look into the actual result, then this is what the agent will receive as the textual context and what it's going to work with. So this is exactly the email that we have just received. Perfect. So let's see what this agent makes out of this. But before we do, let's just close this, because what we obviously need to do, because we already told this in the system prompt to the agent, that it does have access to the pre-sales agent and then also, to the client relations agent. So depending on the matter of this specific email that we have just received, one or the other might be more appropriate. And you can already see that, we're just building an example flow right here. But if you understand how this works and how the communication between those flows work, then this is something that's basically infinitely scalable, right? So before we go on, we actually need to take care of the subsequent agents, right? We need to build them first. So what I have done is that I have prepared another flow, as you can see, and this is going to be our pre-sales agent. And we are going to click on the very first node right here, or look for the first node. And now we actually have something special, because this is now a dedicated node, which is specifically designed to connect different flows, different n8n flows. And you can see that this obviously is a dedicated flow that we are in right now to connect these kinds of flows with each other, right? So that it can be basically called from the outside. And the name of the specific flow is also quite self-explanatory, because it's actually called when executed by another workflow, right? So this is exactly what it's doing. So I'm going to click on this, and then I have these a couple of fields right here, and I'm going to close this so that you can have a better look. And this is already it, right? So this will actually be the gateway how other flows are able to call this specific flow, right? Now, there are other options that we need to take care of. I'm going to jump into this, and we need to define what and where the incoming data would actually be coming from, or what kind of we would accept, so what kind of data does this flow accept as incoming data. And there are basically 2 or 3 options, and we are just going to take a look at the first 2. The first one is to accept all data, right? So this is, if I click on this, then you can already see that this removes all the additional options, because this basically means that anytime everything or any flow calls this flow or sends some data into this flow, then this is going to be accepted and is going to be processed further down the line, right? Now, if you want to have a little more control, and I'm going to jump into the settings again, then you can use the define using fields below option. What this allows us to do is to add specific fields that we then have to pre-fill and populate from the calling parent flow, if you will, and then they will have access, or that parent flow will have access to the fields that we have defined right here, right, which also have to contain some data, right? But then we can actually be really thorough and be really specific into what kind of data we are going to accept. But we are now going to take the easy route, and I'm just going to choose the accept all data, and this is already it in regards to the settings right here. Now, the next thing is already that we want to add another AI agent. So I'm going to jump into the AI section, into the AI agent node, and this is something that we have already taken a look at. So I'm going to choose as the source for the prompt the define below option. Again, I'm also going to add an additional option, which is the system message, and I already have prepared the prompt right here. So I'm going to remove this one. I'm going to paste in the prompt that I have prepared, and let's open this again so that we can have a better look. You are an assistant for looking up availability, project timelines, pricing, and other relevant information on behalf of the creative agency Brightwork Studio. And this is obviously just a sample name. And then your task is to process instructions received from the orchestrator agent, right? And this is also where we have the connection between those two levels, because the specific query or the specific instruction will be coming from the orchestrating agent, right? So it's basically like, like a supervisor or the boss, who is giving specific instructions to his employee. And then we're giving it a little more context. The orchestrator agent has received an initial email from a client and has forwarded the relevant inquiry to you, and so on and so forth. Now, you can read this on your own. As I've mentioned already, I'm happy to share this prompt with you. Now, the important part is also that we are going to equip this specific pre-sales agent with additional tools, right? And we are telling it what kinds of tools he wants to use, or he should use. So the following tools are available to process the inquiry: and service and pricing sheet in Google Sheets, and we're going to take a look at this. Then we have project and capacity tracker, and then we have the team capacity. So obviously this is it's really specific, and this depends on your specific case. But this is what you should do by telling the agent what it has access to in regards to the tools, right? And let's actually take a look into the according sheet, because this is something that I have prepared. So as you can see, this is just Brightwork Studio Operations Hub. The file is called like that, and then the sheets are called service pricing, and then project overview, and then team capacity, and this is just some sample data, but it's quite realistic in regards to, what they offer and what the pricing of this would be, and so on and so forth. All right, and these tables, these sheets, if you will, these are the ones that the pre-sales agent will or should have access to, right? This is what we have defined in the prompt itself. All right, so let's close this again. This is already it. I'm also going to fill in the user message, and I'm just going to paste this message. This is the message of the orchestrating agent, and then we have another variable, and now we can actually know, or now we know where we are receiving that data from, right? Because this query is actually now coming from the previous node, and if I close this again, then the previous node is as I've mentioned already, right? The door, if you will, in the gateway, how this specific agent will receive the data from the parent workflow, from the instructing orchestrating agent. All right, and now we also need a chat model, obviously. So again, I'm going to look for Open Router, and let's just take Kimi K2.5 for this. This is also quite reliable. So let's just call this Kimi and then K2.5. This is already it. And now we already have equipped it with the system prompt itself, and then also with the model. And the next thing is to give it access to the specific Google Sheet, right? So let's quickly do this. So I'm going to click on the tools connector right here, and this is the plus icon. I'm going to look for the Sheets tool, and this is giving me access to the Google Sheets tool. And if I click on this, then I'm going to select my account again. The tool description can be set automatically. The resource we're dealing with will be a sheet within a document. This is exactly what we want, right? And then we have the operation, which is to get a row, because now we want this specific pre-sales agent to have access to the information from that specific Google Sheet, and to have reading access is sufficient in this case, right? Because it's actually just about receiving and pulling that data out of that Google Sheet to be able to respond to that specific inquiry. All right, then we have the document that we want to work with, and I'm going to look for Brightwood or Brightwork, and the sheet now in this case will first of all be the service pricing table, and then we have a couple of filters that we don't need right now. So this is already it. So we just need to give it access to that specific sheet. We are also going to name the subnode like the sheet, which is service and pricing, so that also the agent kind of knows what this tool does, right? Because if I close this, then you can see that we now have equipped it with this specific tool, and it actually is able and needs to read the title, not only the title, but also, if I jump back into the note again, also the description, so that it basically knows what this specific tool does, right? Especially, and we're going to see this in a second, if it has access to multiple nodes of the same kind, right? So these are all going to be Google Sheets node, because what I'm going to do is that I'm going to click on the three dots right here, and I'm going to click on duplicate. as you can see, and I'm going to put this all or connect this via the tool again, and then I'm going to double click into this, and now I'm just going to change the sheet that I want to have it access to from service pricing to project overview. I'm also going to rename it and just call it project overview, and now you can already see that it's kind of important that it actually knows what the difference between these Google Sheets are, so that it knows which one it needs to call. All right, let's do this a third time. I'm going to use the short key for this, which is Control or Command D, and I'm going to connect it to the last node. I'm also going to rename it to the team capacity is the sheet that we are dealing with, team capacity, and then jumping into the subnode again, and now I'm going to select the sheet team capacity, and that's already it. So now it actually has this specific pre-sales agent, and I'm also going to rename it so that it's easier for us to track the task of this agent. Now you can see that this is now a dedicated agent, which is, you could consider him as an expert in its according field, which is to retrieve data from the database. Okay, perfect. So this is already it. And now let's take care of the last agent, which is going to be our client relations agent. And there are no big surprises here, because what we are now going to do, and I'm going to jump back into the very first diagram, if you will, from the start, which is we have now our orchestrating agent, which now has access, or not yet, but we're going to give it access to the pre-sales agent, right? And the second thing is that we also want to give it access to the client relations agent, and then it will be able to decide on its own which one is the most appropriate. So let's jump into the last flow, which is our client relations agent. And now again, the logic will be the same, which is that we are going to use the when executed by another workflow trigger. And again, we can just accept all data. And this is already it to give, the orchestrating agent also access to this agent right here. We are going to add another agent, which is in the AI section, and then AI agent. Again, we have our source prompt right here. I'm going to select define below. And in the options, I have a system message. I'm going to delete this one, and I'm going to paste my prepared prompt. And I'm going to paste this, and let's take a quick look at this. So you are an assistant responsible for handling client complaints and escalation cases on behalf of Brightwork Studio, right? And then also tools, you have access to a vector database containing all internal guidelines related to client communication, right? So it basically will now receive those. This specific agent will now be able to have access to a document which contains the guidelines of this specific, fictitious agency. And I have already prepared this document as well. So internal guidelines, client communication, complaint handling, and escalation procedures, and then this is just some sample document, which kind of explains how to handle these cases. Okay, back into n8n, and we also need the prompt for the user message, and this is also just going to be, this is the message from the orchestrator agent, and then again we have our variable which will contain the information from the incoming query. All right, let's also rename this in the top left corner, and this is going to be our client relations agent. I'm going to hit enter, and then I'm going to close this. And now we also obviously need another chat model, so let's just keep this as we have done before. I'm going to use OpenRouter, and let's just keep the 4.1 mini. It doesn't really matter right now. I'm going to also rename this GPT 5.1 mini. And now, again, we need to equip it with the connection to this specific document, right? And if you want to know how you can connect an agent to have access to unstructured data like we have here, right, then feel free to take a look into the video that I have created on RAG systems and how to connect your AI agent within n8n to these kinds of systems, because what we will not be able to do is just to equip it with, the tool of Google Docs and to have it access to this, or at least that's not the preferable way. But what you need to do is to create a vector database for this. And if I jump onto this site right here, then you can see that I am now within my Pinecone vector database, and you can take a look into the databases, what you have saved before right here. So this is basically a vector representation of this specific document, right? So this is basically now split into chunks, and all these chunks are now available. And you can see if I hover over this, then you can see that this is basically a text snippet out of this specific document, right? So we need to take this reroute, if you will, of giving the AI agent access to this specific document by using such a vector database. And as I've mentioned, this is a topic in and of its own, but I have created a tutorial about this if you want to know more about that. All right, so what I'm going to do is to click on the tools again, and then I'm going to look for a Pinecone, and I have already access to this. As you can see, Pinecone Vector Store, this is exactly what I want to use. This again is connected to via the credentials to my account. The operation mode will be to retrieve documents, and then we need to set a description for this. So let's just say work. We're just going to take the example that you see right here. Or actually, let's delete this. Let's just take access the Brightwork Studio guidelines, right? And now I also need to define the vector database table, if you will, from my account that this agent should have access to, right? So it's basically kind of the same like Google Sheets. And as you can already see, I have the Brightwork guidelines, right? And this is basically this document right here, right? So if I scroll up, then you can see that this is called Brightwork guidelines, and it contains several snippets which basically make up this complete document. And jumping back into n8n, so this is how I've set the connection to that. All right, perfect. Now, great. Everything else can just stay as is. I'm going to close this, and now you already see that we have this red triangle, because what we also need to add to this specific node is to have an embedding model. And again, I'm not going to get into this right now, but if you click on this, then you have a couple of providers that do provide these embedding models. I'm just going to use OpenAI for this, and this is connected to my OpenAI account, and I'm just going to keep the settings right here, text embedding 3 small. One little thing that I need to be aware of are the dimensions, and if I click on the options and I select the dimensions, then you can see that there are several options I can choose from, and I'm going to set this to a 512 right here. Reason being is that if I jump back into Pinecone itself, then when I created this database right here, then you can see that if I hover over this icon right here, that the dimensions that are defined for this specific database are 512 as well, right? And these both of these settings need to match. Again, if you want to know more about this, then take a look at the according tutorial. All right, so I am within n8n, and again, I am going to close this, and this is already it. Now, it does have access now to this specific document via the vector store. Perfect. So that's already it. So perfect. We have now, if I jump into our chart here again, I have set up the pre-sales agent. We have set up the client relations agent, and they are now both equipped with all the tools they need to conduct their recording tasks. And we also have defined everything in the orchestrating agent so that it basically knows what to do. Fantastic. Now, the last thing that we need to do is to, first of all, need to take care of the connection between the orchestrating agent and the subsequent agent, right? And the way I do this is that I am going to click on the tools in the orchestrating agent. So I'm basically now in the parent workflow, if you will, and clicking on this gives me a couple of options, when one of them is called Call n8n Workflow Tool, right? And this is also quite semantic, because it basically gives you the explanation of what this specific tool does, which is to call another workflow, right? So if I click on this, then you can see, first of all, I need to define a description, which is kind of important so that it basically knows how to call the other workflows, right? And what the specific call does, because at the end of the day, technically this is still a tool, right? So the tools are, the extra capabilities that we are giving our agent access to, but it needs to know what it does and how it can access this, right? So we need to have a description. And I'm just going to call it, use this tool to call the pre-sales agent, which is quite sufficient. And I'm just going to take the name also, and I'm going to rename the flow right here, or rename the subnode actually, so that it also has this connection. All right, now the next setting is to have a to actually make that connection, right? And as a source, I'm going to select database. So I'm going to keep this as is, and within the workflows right now, if I click on this, then you can see that I have actually access to all the flows that have the trigger, and I'm going back into n8n of when executed by another workflow, right? So just defining this trigger right here and then publishing the flow for later reference will give another flow, or will give other flows access to this flow, right? So this is everything we need to be aware of. So set up the trigger node as we have done here. I'm going to publish this just to be sure. I'm going to do the same thing with the next flow. I'm also going to publish this. So this is now my client relations agent, which also has this trigger. And now jumping back into my orchestrator agent, I now have access to both of these flows, as you can see. So the client relations agent demo, and then also the pre-sales agent demo. Perfect. So I'm going to select the pre-sales agent right here, and that's already it. All right, and I'm going to close this right here, and I am now going to do the exact same thing for the client relations agent. So I'm going to click on tools, I'm going to select Call n8n Workflow, and then again from the database, after I've added the description, so this is use this tool to call the client relations agent, and I am giving it the name of client relations agent as well. And again, the source is the database from my flows, and if I click on this and open this up, then I'm going to select the client relations agent demo. And this is already it. So what we have done now, and I'm going to jump back into the first chart here, is that we have now built dedicated workflows, right? And these are now all available to the orchestrating agent. Perfect. So let's actually test this. So I'm going to run the flow, and let's just see what happens. I'm going to execute a flow. And now we can see that it is working. And now you can see how it is actually calling the pre-sales agent. if you see that, right? So we have the spinner icon around the pre-sales agent. So depending on the content of the mail, obviously, right, this is the appropriate way to go. And if now I jump into the pre-sales agent flow, then first of all, you can see that we don't see anything, right? So we don't see any spinning icons or whatever, but this is perfectly normal, because if you start the flow from within itself using the execute workflow button, then you see, or then you can basically watch live what it is doing. Right, but if I jump into the according flow that it has called, then you can see that there's nothing happening. But if I jump into the executions, then you can see that there is actually stuff happening, and now we can even see how the pre-sales agent worked, right? So I can not see the live or in the live view how this is working, but within the executions tab, I can see the previous runs and the current run as the latest run as well. And here you can already see now that it did use the Google Sheets note, or the Sheets tools, right? So it did try to access, or it did also access the sheets that we have used to. And if I jump into the pre-sales agent itself, then now you can see that from the left-hand side, this is now the incoming query that it received from the parent flow, i.e. from the orchestrating agent, right? So if, for instance, we have the client inquiry email, and then it says client, and then Julia Myers, brand and marketing manager, Brent Nova, and this is exactly based on the email that we have received, right? The sample email that we have received. And now, using the query variable right here, we can see that by dragging and dropping this beforehand, it is now able to access the content of the mail, but this is not necessarily exactly the same content from the mail, but it might be that the parent workflow, the orchestrating agent, has used a different way to formulate the specific query, right? Because this is now coming from the parent workflow, from the orchestrating agent. And now the pre-sales agent has done its work by conducting the tools and the database and tables that it has access to. And now on the right hand side, we do see the output, right? And here you can now see, here is the information for the client response organized by the 6 requested items. And then it is basically going through all of the data that it found via this table it has access to, right? And notice also how the response of the pre-sales agent is formulated, right? So this is now not a response that you would put into an email. Reason being is that via the system prompt, we already told it it's supposed to be answering to the orchestrating agent, right? So it's basically talking to its supervisor or a colleague, right? And not responding to the client directly. And it knows this because of the system prompt. All right, so this is now the output, and this is now what the orchestrating agent has received from the pre-sales agent. And if I now close this agent again and I go back to the orchestrating agent, then you can now see that the flow has finished. And also interesting is that it has also used the client relations agent, right? So there might be a necessity in, regards to, or depending on the orchestrating agent, to also consult this specific agent, right? And this might be a different query. But let's take a look into the output. And now you can actually see that the output of the orchestrating agent now is actually also the response or the answer that we would send back to the prospect, right? In this case, Julia. So we are saying, hi, Julia, thanks for reaching out and for the kind words about our work. We'd love to help Brent Nova with a full 8 to 10 page website redesign and ongoing social support, and so on and so forth. And now it is basically picking up the information it has received from its subsequent flows, right? From the agents that were orchestrated by the parent workflow. All right, this has worked very well, and even at the first try, I am going to close this, and now you can do with this response whatever you want, right? So for instance, if you want to respond back right to the client, then you would need a Gmail note, then we would use send a message note, and then we would basically use the according fields, and especially the message field right here, to use the output of the orchestrating agent, and then we have that text inside the body of the email itself, and then we would send it back right to the client. So we would look for the sender email. So I have scrolled down to the from object, to the from variable, and within this I have the text, and this is the email the email was sent from, right? So in our case, this would be Julia, basically. So I'm going to drag and drop this into the to field, and then in regards to the subject, I'm just going to take the same subject that we have received, and then the email type can be set to text, and then this would be the text. This is going to be sent out back to the client, and if I open this up, then now you can see that this is all the information that Julia, in this case, would receive. All right, perfect. So I'm going to close this and then also close this. And now you can see that this is now one cohesive system, right? And we do have our, board of advisors, right, if you will, and our employees, whatever you want to call them, right? And these are now the helper agents of this upper agent, right, of this orchestrating agent. And now you can see where this could lead to. And this doesn't have to end there, right? You can either add more agents by adding those via the tools section. But what you can also do, and now you can think of an organizational chart, which is built like a pyramid. And the pre-sales agent itself could also have, via the tools, have access to other agents further down the line, right? So you might have a head of department, for instance, and then, below this, you would have further experts, right? And this is an infinite system that you could build. All right, and now you can see how we have actually, rebuilt the whole architecture right here, and how you can scale this to your liking. And by the way, if you want to learn how to use n8n in depth, and if you want to really get into AI design and everything that contains automations and consists of automations, then jump into my school community, which is completely free, and you will learn about the basics of n8n. You will learn how to build AI agents, RAG in n8n, and everything there is. We will go into scraping and everything that you can imagine. I really appreciate the attention. Hope to see you next time, and see ya. Bye.